She was hired to clean, nothing more, until the billionaire walked in and saw her cradling his nonverbal daughter, singing a lullaby only his late wife ever knew. How did the maid know that song? And what secret was she keeping that could shatter everything he believed about love, grief, and fate? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Natalie Cruz tightened her grip on her worn canvas bag as the black iron gates of the Whitmore estate creaked open. Her sneakers crunched softly against the gravel path, and though the mansion ahead shimmered like something out of a dream, her heart pounded with something closer to dread than awe. This was her last chance. She had applied to dozens of places with no callbacks. Her references were solid, but she didn't have the kind of polished background wealthy employers wanted. Still, she'd taken the risk after hearing that the Whitmore estate needed a new maid, and now, as the grand entrance loomed in front of her, she reminded herself that her mother's medications weren't going to pay for themselves. Every step she took was for her. "Miss Cruz?" A crisp voice startled her. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair stood by the entrance. She wore a dark navy uniform and a no-nonsense expression. "I'm Mrs. Holloway, head of household staff. Follow me." Natalie offered a quiet nod, clutching her bag tighter. Inside, the mansion smelled of polished wood and something more sterile. It was beautiful but cold. All clean lines and expensive silence. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath towering ceilings. The walls lined with sober paintings and expensive antiques. It felt less like a home and more like a museum. Mrs. Holloway led her down a long hallway, speaking as they walked. "You'll be responsible for daily cleaning, laundry, and light kitchen duties. No need to interact with Mr. Whitmore unless he asks. Most importantly, do not engage with the child beyond what is strictly necessary." Natalie blinked. "The child?" Mrs. Holloway stopped at a door. "Luna, 7 years old. She has nonverbal autism. Mr. Whitmore insists she follow her own routine, and he does not Torrent said. Natalie nodded slowly, absorbing the warning, though something in her stirred at the name. Luna. A soft name. Sad, even. "You'll be staying in the West Wing. Meals are served in the kitchen. You'll find the other staff cordial, but we keep to our duties." She opened the door to a modest but clean room. "Unpack. Rest. You start at 6 tomorrow." Natalie sat on the edge of the bed after Mrs. Holloway left, exhaling slowly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, stable. She took out a photo of her mother, folded at the corners, and set it on the nightstand. "Just a few months," she whispered, "until we get back on our feet." Warning came quickly. The mansion was quiet, almost eerily so. Natalie moved through her tasks with care and dusting the baseboards, wiping windows, sweeping stairwells so vast she got winded. The work was physical, but it kept her mind busy. She didn't see Mr. Whitmore that first day, just the distant echo of footsteps across marble and the occasional muffled phone call. But once, as she passed the entrance to the East Wing, she glimpsed a man standing near the library. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. He didn't acknowledge her. And then there was the child. Natalie didn't see Luna directly for the first few days, but she felt her presence. Toys carefully arranged on a window seat, a coloring book half filled with vivid swirls. Crumbs near the kitchen door, always swept quickly away by others before Natalie could meet her. On the 4th day, Natalie entered the music room to dust the grand piano. She kept her movements light, her presence quiet. The air felt still, heavy even. She noticed something out of the corner of her eye, a small figure crouched behind the curtain. Not moving. Just watching. She didn't turn, she didn't speak. Instead, she began to hum. It was a lullaby her mother used to sing when pain and poverty made the nights too heavy. Gentle, wordless, a melody shaped by love. She finished, dusting the piano, the notes of the lullaby still trailing in the air, and left the room. She never looked back, but as she walked down the hallway, she felt the slightest flutter of hope. Each day afterward, Natalie made sure to hum a different tune while working. Always soft, always brief, just in case. Luna remained a shadow, quiet, observing from behind curtains or stair railings. She never spoke, never made eye contact. But Natalie began to notice small signs. A stuffed animal placed in a counter where Natalie would find it. A crayon sketch left on a counter. Silent tokens. Like whispers. One afternoon, Natalie finished folding linen in the upstairs laundry room and stepped into the hallway. A soft shuffle caught her attention. She turned slowly and saw Luna standing at the far end of the corridor, barefoot and small in her lavender pajamas. Natalie didn't move. Luna stared at her for a long second. Then, as if startled by her own courage, she ran. But something had shifted. Later that night, Natalie passed the child's room and paused. Through the barely open door, she could hear the faint echo of the lullaby she had hummed earlier. Not sung, just repeated as sound. Gentle, broken, but there. Natalie covered her mouth to stifle a breath. Mrs. Holloway warned her again the next morning. "You've been seen lingering near the east wing. I advise you to keep your head down. Mr. Whitmore does not appreciate boundary crossing." Promised to be more mindful. But in her chest, something quiet and determined was growing. Not defiance, something deeper. She didn't do anything drastic, didn't speak to Luna, didn't break rules outright, but she let her presence be gentle. Left origami animals on windowsills, arranged flower petals in patterns on the floor, small offerings of calm. Then came the storm. Rain fell hard that night, lightning flashing through the vast windows. Natalie was scrubbing dishes when she heard it, a loud crash, followed by a scream. She ran without thinking, heart hammering. Luna had knocked over a lamp in the hallway. The glass shattered around her. She stood frozen, eyes wide, body shaking. "It's okay," Natalie whispered, hands up. "I won't touch you. Just breathe." Luna didn't move. Natalie knelt slowly, at a safe distance. "Would you like me to hum?" A beat. Then, the slightest nod. Natalie began, the same lullaby as before. Luna's shoulders relaxed. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor, her little hands trembling but no longer clenched. Natalie stayed where she was, singing, until the storm outside softened. From the top of the stairs, unseen by both, Damien Whitmore watched. The next morning, Natalie expected to be fired. Instead, a note appeared on her bedside table. "Keep doing what you're doing." No name, no signature. But Natalie smiled. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel quite so cold. Natalie Cruz adjusted the hem of her uniform and exhaled softly as she walked past the marble staircase that led to the east wing Luna's wing. Luna's wing, a long hallway of silence, greeted her, dimly lit by the soft daylight streaming through tall, arched windows. But the house was always quiet, but this part of it held a stillness that felt sacred, untouched. Luna Whitmore, 7 years old, with wide, dark eyes and hair that curled around her face like ivy, was often found staring at nothing, or perhaps everything. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't scream. She simply watched from her corner of the world, a little figure wrapped in the quiet hush of her own silence. Natalie had been working at the Whitmore estate for almost a month now. In that time, she had learned the rhythms of the house, the distant echoes of the staff avoiding interaction, the cold efficiency expected by Mr. Damien Whitmore. But none of that compared to what she'd begun to quietly observe about Luna. She noticed how Luna would flinch at the sound of clinking china or retreat behind the curtains if anyone raised their voice. She noticed how the little girl stared at the painting of a mother and child in the study for long minutes, her fingers twitching as though aching to touch. She noticed how Luna would eat only when her food was arranged in precise color order. Green beans never touching mashed potatoes, bread never touching meat. Natalie respected the unspoken rules, but she also saw through them. She began to leave tiny gifts behind. Nothing grand, nothing noticeable. A smooth pebble shaped like a heart tucked beneath Luna's pillow. A soft cloth doll with braided yarn hair placed near her books. A tiny music box that, played a lullaby so softly it seemed to whisper. She never saw Luna react, but the items were never left behind, never discarded. One by one, they disappeared into the girl's world. Sometimes, Natalie found Luna watching her while she dusted the bookshelves or wiped the tall windows. Not openly, but reflected through the polished glass, Natalie would catch a flash of eyes, a tilt of the head, a quiet presence peering from behind the armchair or hallway doorway. Natalie never acknowledged her directly. She simply smiled gently and continued cleaning. But she began to hum, quiet, soothing melodies she remembered from her own childhood. Spanish lullabies her mother had once whispered to her when fevers kept her awake, when the nights felt long and cruel. It was late one afternoon when something changed. Natalie was kneeling beside the living room cabinet, organizing candle holders, when she heard a soft rustling behind her. Not the sharp, cautious movement of a child sneaking past, but something slower, deliberate. She turned her head slightly. Luna was standing a few feet away. Not hiding, not watching from a corner, just standing there, her hands clutched in front of her chest. Natalie froze, afraid to move too fast, afraid to shatter the fragile trust that had somehow taken root between them. Then, Luna did something Natalie didn't expect. She stepped forward and placed her small hand gently on Natalie's wrist. Natalie's heart caught. She looked at the girl, meeting those wide brown eyes that had never held hers for more than a second. This time, Luna didn't look away. Nearly. Belief, Natalie whispered with tenderness, unable to stop the words as they fell from her lips. She gently turned her hand and let her fingers wrap around Luna's. There was no resistance. The little girl simply stood there, holding on. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world narrowed to the touch between them, to the shared silence that no longer felt hollow. Then Luna stepped closer, resting her head lightly against Natalie's shoulder. Natalie's eyes stung with sudden tears. She didn't dare move, didn't dare speak. Instead, she did the only thing she could think to do. She began to hum again. But this time, the tune changed. She sang words under her breath, a lullaby soft as a feather drifting down. Duerme mina, do not touch me, I'm a boy and mind my own self. You are met the pedazo de mi corazón. She hadn't sung that song in years. It was one her mother used to sing when Natalie was very little, a lullaby passed down through generations. The words came back to her, like muscle memory, wrapped in warmth and grief and aching softness. Luna's breathing slowed, her tiny fingers clutching tighter as the song filled the quiet room. But someone else heard it. Behind the archway, Damien Whitmore stood frozen, a mug of untouched tea in his hand, the rim shaking slightly. His eyes were wide, disbelief warred with memory across his face. The words, the melody, the language. His late wife had sung that exact lullaby. Not just the melody. Anyone could hum a tune, but the phrasing, the inflection, the way the words dipped and lifted like petals falling through wind. It was identical. Damien stepped closer, but not enough to be seen. He watched as Luna leaned into Natalie, her expression peaceful for the first time in years. He didn't understand. Who was this woman? And how did she know that lullaby? Natalie didn't see Damien standing behind the archway. Her focus was entirely on Luna, this delicate child whose world had been nothing but shadows and silence, now reaching toward warmth. Natalie continued to hum, her voice low, tender, barely above a whisper. Her hands moved slowly, as if afraid that even kindness might break the moment. Luna stayed there for a long time, her small fingers still laced with nodalies, and though she didn't speak a word, her touch, her closeness, told volumes. When Luna finally let go and stepped back, Natalie simply smiled at her. She didn't ask questions, she didn't press. She let the moment speak for itself. Luna turned and walked away in silence, but not with the same retreating posture Natalie had once seen. There was something different in her gait now, a quiet sense of safety. Later that evening, as Natalie was folding linens in the staff hallway, Mrs. Aldridge, the housekeeper, approached with a tight look. "Mr. Whitmore wants to speak with you in the study," she said curtly. Natalie's breath caught. She swallowed and nodded, her thoughts raced. Had she crossed a line? Had Damien seen her with Luna? The rules had been clear from the beginning. No emotional entanglement, no attempts to bond. Only routine, only function. She knocked once on the study door and stepped inside. Damien stood by the window, his back to her. His suit jacket was draped over the chair, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up. He didn't turn to face her. "You sang today," he said quietly. I hesitated. "Yes, sir." He turned around now, his expression unreadable. His eyes searched hers, not with anger, but with something far more complex. "Song. Where did you learn it?" Natalie blinked, caught off guard. "It's something my mother sang to me when I was little, a lullaby from her childhood. I used to hum it when I couldn't sleep." Damien narrowed his eyes, not with suspicion, but wonder. "It's the same song my wife sang to Luna, word for word." Natalie's lips parted. I didn't know." "You couldn't have," he murmured. "But when I heard it today, it felt like—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. There was a long silence between them, thick with something unspoken. Natalie remained still, waiting, her heart thudding. "You do understand the rules in this house," Damien said at last. Said quietly, "I do. But take that choice to break them." "I didn't mean to overstep," she said, her voice soft but steady. I saw how lonely she was, how afraid. I wasn't trying to force anything, I just thought maybe she needed to feel something gentle, even if it was only a song." Damien walked toward his desk, placing both hands on the surface, as if steadying himself. "Luna hasn't let anyone touch her since we lost her mother. She won't even look most people in the eye." Ev's days dropped. "I didn't plan for her to, she just came to me." Damien looked at her now with something different in his expression. Not the cold disapproval she expected, but a kind of awe, a kind of guilt. "I don't understand how you did it," he said, "but for the first time in years I saw her. Really saw her. She was calm, at peace." Natalie took a breath. Maybe she just needed someone who didn't expect her to be anyone but herself. His jaw tensed, and he looked away again. "You've done more in a month than therapists and specialists have in 3 years." Natalie said nothing. She didn't know what to say. Then Damien turned to her fully. "You may continue with your work, but I'm lifting the restrictions. If Luna comes to you, if she trusts you, I won't interfere." Natalie nodded, a soft "thank you" in her eyes. As she turned to leave, Damien spoke again, softer this time. "Dawn. It was the last thing my wife sang to Luna before she passed." Natalie's steps faltered. "She used to sit at the edge of Luna's bed every night and hum that lullaby," he said. "Even when Luna stopped speaking, she would hum back sometimes. It was their language." Natalie's throat tightened. It must have meant everything to her. "It did," Damien said. "And now, somehow, you've brought it back?" That night, as Natalie walked the quiet halls toward her quarters, she felt a shift, not just in the household, but inside her. She hadn't expected to be here long. She'd only taken the job out of desperation, needing money for her mother's treatment. But now, this place, this cold, sad house, was starting to feel different. Because of Luna. Because of a song. Over the next few days, Natalie adjusted her routine subtly. She never imposed, but every now and then she left little origami animals by Luna's bed. Paper cranes, tiny foxes, little folded hearts. And once in a while, she'd pass through Luna's hallway, humming softly. Not the full song, just enough to carry a note of comfort. And Luna responded, not with words, but with presence. She would come into rooms where Natalie worked. She would sit nearby as Natalie folded towels or arranged flowers. She even began leaving her own small gifts, painted stones, drawings left on Natalie's cart, feathers tucked between folded towels. Natalie never made a big deal of it. She simply smiled, accepted the offerings with gratitude, and returned the quiet kindness. One afternoon, as Natalie dusted the piano in the music room, Luna approached. Without a word, she lifted her hand and touched the keys. One soft note at a time. Then she looked at Natalie and pointed. Natalie sat beside her. "You want me to play?" Luna nodded once. Natalie's fingers trembled, but she played. The same lullaby. Slowly, gently, like a breeze on still water. And for the first time since she arrived, Luna smiled. It was small, fleeting, but it lit up the entire room. From the hallway, Damien watched again, something breaking loose in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was sorrow or healing. Maybe it was both. Damien Whitmore stood frozen just beyond the doorway, the shadows of the corridor curling around his shoulders like old regrets. His expression was unreadable, but his chest rose and fell with a quiet intensity. The sound that had drawn him here, Natalie's voice, still lingered in the air like a whisper. She had been singing that lullaby, the same lullaby Evelyn used to grip her Luna during her nighttime routines. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. Every inflection, every pause. He stepped into the room. Natalie gasped, her fingers still resting on Luna's back. Luna, surprisingly, didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, her tiny hand still lightly clutching the edge of Natalie's sweater. "Are you doing?" Damien's voice was calm but razor-sharp underneath. Natalie stood slowly. Heard the song," he cut in. "How do you know it?" Natalie blinked, her breath catching. I don't. I wasn't thinking. Sometimes I sing when I'm nervous or trying to comfort someone. My mother used to sing that to me when I was a girl. I thought maybe..." Damien's eyes narrowed. "Your mother?" "She passed it to me. I never knew it had a connection to anyone else." He crossed his arms. "That's convenient." Her face flushed with confusion and pain. "Are you suggesting I'm lying?" "I'm suggesting," he said, voice low, "that this world isn't kind. And I've had too many people try to worm their way into this house using whatever stories they can spin. And now here you are, knowing songs you shouldn't, connecting with my daughter when no one else could. Tell me that doesn't look suspicious." Tears welled in Natalie's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I didn't mean to offend you, sir. I didn't even know the song belonged to your wife. It's something I carried from my own childhood." "You expect me to believe that coincidence?" Damien snapped. "I don't expect anything from you," she whispered, "except, perhaps, the benefit of the doubt." The room fell into tense silence. Luna's fingers clutched tighter at Natalie's sweater. "I think it's time you left for the evening," Damien said. "We'll reevaluate your employment tomorrow." Natalie hesitated, then gently pried Luna's hand from her clothing. "I'm sorry, Luna," she whispered. Luna didn't speak. She never did. But her eyes, her wide, stormy gray eyes, followed Natalie all the way to the door. That night, Natalie cried quietly into her pillow. She hadn't meant to get close, she knew the rules, but Luna wasn't a rule, aching for comfort. And Natalie couldn't shut off the part of her that cared. That part had always been her undoing. The next morning, she expected to be dismissed. But when she arrived, one of the housekeepers silently handed her a cleaning schedule and walked away. No one said anything about the previous night. No official reprimand, no confrontation, just a cold, careful silence. But something had shifted. Damien no longer avoided her. In fact, he watched her now, closely. At first, it unnerved her, but soon she realized he wasn't looking for faults. He was observing. He watched how Luna lingered near doorways when Natalie cleaned. He saw how she quietly accepted toys placed near her space, small plush animals Natalie brought from the dollar store. He noticed how Luna no longer reacted violently to unexpected noise when Natalie was the one speaking, softly, in the background. The change was subtle, but undeniable. One afternoon, as Natalie dusted the high bookshelves in the study, the butler approached her quietly. "You've made an impression," he said under his breath. She looked at him, confused. "I beg your pardon?" "Miss Luna. She's sleeping through the night now, less restless, more curious." "Good, isn't it?" He nodded. "It is, but it's also unexpected. The family's been through a lot. Mr. Whitmore doesn't trust easily." "Natalie said softly. "I'm not here to betray that." The butler's eyes steadied her for a long moment. Then he gave her a curt nod and walked away. That evening, Natalie lingered a moment longer outside Luna's room after tucking her in. Luna had reached out again that day. Not a word, but a single touch to Natalie's wrist. A request for the lullaby. Natalie sang it slowly, barely above a whisper, and Luna had pressed her face into the pillow with something almost like peace. As Natalie stepped into the hallway, Damien was waiting. His arms were crossed, but his expression wasn't angry, just tired and uncertain. "Do you remember more songs like that one?" he asked. Natalie startled slightly. Yes, a few." "Would you keep singing them?" She hesitated. "For Luna?" He nodded. "Well, if it helps her." Another pause. "I thought I'd fired you." "You did," she said with a tiny smile. "But no one told me to leave." He almost smiled. Almost. Then the moment passed. He cleared his throat. "Be careful," he said. "I'm still not sure who you are, Miss Cruz." "I'm just a maid," she said, trying to care for someone who deserves more than silence. After he left, Natalie leaned against the wall and exhaled. She wasn't sure what was happening, but something was thawing, not just in Luna, but in the house itself. Within days, murmurs began among the staff. "She looks happier, doesn't she?" She smiled. "I swear I saw her smile. It's that new maid. She's different." Natalie heard the whispers. Some carried warmth, others resentment. She didn't engage either way. She kept her head down, cleaned, comforted, and left quietly at the end of the day. But Luna kept reaching for her. And each time, Natalie reached back. In the kitchen one evening, the cook cornered her. "You've changed her," the woman said. "I've been here 8 years. That little girl never let anyone near her." "I didn't change her," Natalie replied. "She's always been this way. She just needed someone to notice." The cook nodded slowly. "That may be true, but don't get comfortable. You're not one of us yet, not really." Natalie swallowed hard. "I don't want anything that doesn't belong to me." "Be careful," the cook said, voice low. "You get too close to that family and you either become indispensable or disposable." That night, as Natalie walked home, through the soft drizzle of rain, she thought about those words. She didn't want to become anything other than helpful. She had no desire to belong to the family, but Luna had slipped into her heart without asking. And Damien? He was still an enigma, still guarded, but the way he looked at his daughter now, there was something less hollow in his eyes, less haunted. She wondered if he'd ever grieved properly, or if he'd buried it all beneath marble floors and polished wood. Natalie closed her umbrella and stood outside her small apartment building. A single window glowed in the darkness, her mother's room. She was still awake. She made her way upstairs, opened the door, and was greeted by the soft humming of the kettle on the stove. Her mother sat in her worn recliner, wrapped in a shawl, eyes closed. "Long day?" she asked. Natalie nodded. "Strange, but hopeful." Her mother smiled. "Hope is a good kind of strange." Natalie knelt beside her. "Do you remember the lullaby you used to sing to me?" Her mother opened one eye. "Which one?" "One with the stars and the moonlight." A slow, soft smile. "I sang that to you when you were sick, when you had the fever and cried in your sleep. Stayed with me." Her mother stroked her hair. "That's how love works. The quiet kind stays the longest." Natalie closed her eyes. In the stillness, she could almost hear Luna's tiny heartbeat pressed against her shoulder. And Damien's eyes sharpened not by anger this time, but by wonder. She wasn't sure what came next. But she knew this. Sometimes, the quietest moments echoed the loudest in the heart. And something inside the Whitmore mansion was beginning to stir. The night sky cracked open with a sharp clap of thunder. Rain lashed against the mansion's tall windows as the storm rolled in fast and angry. The staff moved quickly through the halls, shutting windows, securing shutters, and lighting candles in preparation for possible power loss. But no one noticed the small figure, trembling alone in her room, eyes wide as the sky lit up again with another flash. Luna stood near the window, her little hands pressed tightly against her ears. Her body was rigid, her breathing erratic. Her eyes, though silent, screamed for help. Another thunderclap roared, and she broke. Downstairs, Natalie had just finished wiping the marble steps when she heard it. A long, piercing cry, not loud but aching, like a wound breaking open. She froze, recognizing the sound, not from volume, but from pain. Then came a sudden, frantic knocking of small fists against wood. Natalie dropped the cloth and ran. Luna was having a meltdown. By the time Natalie reached the girl's room, the hallway lights flickered, casting shadows that danced and trembled. The other staff stood nearby, frozen. Some whispered nervously, unsure what to do. Others backed away, unsure how to approach her. Thunder rolled again. Luna was on the floor now, her back against the bed, knees tucked in, her face streaked with tears. She rocked violently, hands over her ears, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Natalie didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees beside her, not touching her yet, but letting Luna see her face. Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. I'm here." A response. She lowered her voice to a soft, hum-low, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. She started with no words, just the soft cadence of sound, steady and warm. Luna's rocking slowed. Natalie continued, inching closer until she could gently wrap her arms around the little girl. She cradled her like porcelain, rocking them both together. "You're safe, baby. It's just a storm. You're not alone." The staff watched, wide-eyed. From the end of the hallway, Damien arrived. He had been in his study when the storm hit, but the sound of Luna's distress had pierced him like a dagger. His pace quickened as he neared her room, but he stopped at the doorway and froze. Natalie held Luna tightly, her own body swaying in perfect rhythm, her voice now singing a lullaby so soft, so familiar. Damien's breath caught. That song? That melody? It was the one his late wife used to sing to Luna. On the nights the little girl cried from nightmares, or when her world felt too loud. No one had sung it since his wife died. He had buried it like he had buried his grief. Yet now, here it was again, spoken by someone who should not have known it, yet sang it like she was born to. Luna whimpered once, a soft stutter of breath. Then she spoke. One word. "Mama." Damien staggered back against the wall. His knees nearly buckled, as the word pierced through the darkness of his grief like lightning through clouds. He hadn't heard Luna say anything in years, not a word, not a sound that carried meaning. Therapists had tried, he had begged, bribed, wept in secret, nothing. Now, with Natalie's arms around her, Luna had spoken. He covered his mouth, emotion threatening to escape in ways he hadn't allowed in years. Natalie didn't know he was there. Her attention was on the little girl, whose sobs had quieted. Her hand stroked Luna's hair gently, her lips now pressed softly to the top of her head. "You're safe," she whispered again. "You're not alone." Luna's fingers clutched the fabric of Natalie's blouse, her head resting against her shoulder. The storm outside raged on, but inside the room, a hush had settled. The staff backed away, slowly, reverently. Damien stayed rooted in place, hidden in the shadows of the hallway. He didn't know what he felt. Relief? Fear? Hope? All tangled in a knot he couldn't undo. After nearly an hour, the storm finally began to wane. The thunder faded to distant rumbles, and the rain softened into a lullaby of its own against the windows. Still holding Luna, Natalie slowly shifted them both onto the rug near the bed. She didn't let go. She didn't speak. She just stayed, steady, calm, present. Damien watched her gently reach for a blanket and drape it over Luna's sleeping form. And then she sat there, barely breathing, as if guarding the most fragile thing in the world. He stepped away before she could notice him, retreating down the hall like a man who had just witnessed something too sacred to disturb. Back in his study, he poured himself a drink with a trembling hand. The image of Luna whispering, "Mama," wouldn't leave him. He pressed the glass to his lips and closed his eyes. His world was changing, and it terrified him. Morning arrived slowly, like a hesitant breath after a sleepless night. Sunlight filtered through pale curtains, casting a gentle glow across Luna's room. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained, in the damp scent of the earth outside, in the still tension that clung to the mansion's hallways. Natalie hadn't moved from her place beside Luna. Her back ached, her arms stiff, but she didn't care. Luna still clutched the edge of her blouse in one small hand, her breathing deep and even. It was the first time Natalie had seen the child sleep without restless twitching or silent whimpers. The door creaked softly. Natalie turned, startled. Damien stood there, disheveled and pale, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. He didn't speak right away. His gaze dropped to Luna, then rose to Natalie. She started to rise, embarrassed to have been found like this. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She was scared. I didn't mean to." "Don't," Damien said, his voice hoarse. "Don't apologize." Natalie froze. He stepped farther into the room, his hands at his sides, uncertain, like a man walking through a dream he didn't trust. He looked at his daughter. He looked at her, and then back at the woman who'd stayed by her side all night. "You sang to her," he said naturally. "Yes." He studied her. "That song, the one you sang last night. How do you know it?" Her cheeks flushed. I didn't know it was yours, or hers. It's just my mother used to sing it to me when I was little, when I couldn't sleep, or I was scared." Damien sat down slowly on the edge of the nearby chair. "He sang that song too," he said quietly, eyes fixed on Luna. "My wife, before she died. She sang it every night to Luna." Silence settled between them. He said, "Mama," Damien added after a beat, "did you hear her?" Natalie's voice cracked. "I did." He didn't speak for a long moment. His fingers trembled as he pressed them together, trying to still them. "I haven't heard her speak since before my wife passed," he whispered. "I didn't do anything special," Natalie said softly. "I was just there. That's exactly what was special." She looked down at her hands. Damien's voice turned distant, almost regretful. "I've paid the best therapists in the country, brought in specialists, flown them in, spared no cost. But nothing ever helped. And then you." Natalie shook her head. "I didn't fix anything. She's still healing. She's still hurting." "Spoke," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. Natalie looked up. Children like Luna, they don't speak because they're silent. They speak when they're safe. His throat tightened. He stood, his emotions guarded once more. "You stayed all night." She needed someone. Yakujina Muvika hung in the air, sharp and naked. Natalie didn't have an answer, not one she could explain, not one she could put into neat words. But Luna stirred just then, her small hand shifting against Natalie's blouse. She didn't cry, she didn't hide. She opened her eyes, sleepy and slow, and looked directly at Damien. Him, not past him, not through him, but at him. Damien froze. She didn't say anything, but her gaze lingered, and when Natalie gently brushed her hair back, Luna leaned into her touch again. It was a gesture so simple, yet so profound, it broke something open in him. "I don't know who you are," Damien murmured, almost to himself, "but you've done something I couldn't." Natalie started to rise again. "I can leave, if you want me to." He looked at her, startled. "Leave?" "I broke the rules. I spoke to her. I stayed in her room. I touched her. I don't," he said again, firmly this time. "You're not being punished." Her eyes flickered with surprise. Damien turned to Luna once more. "I think she chose you." Natalie didn't know what to say. Her heart pounded. A tight knot formed in her chest. Not from fear, from something else. From hope. Evening, the staff whispered again. The storm had gone, but something had changed in the house. For the first time in years, Damien Whitmore didn't lock himself in his study. He walked the halls. He stood longer at Luna's door. He paused in places where silence used to echo. Natalie resumed her work, but everything felt different. She found herself humming softly again. Lullabies, gentle melodies, not loud enough to be intrusive, but just enough to fill the spaces that had been too quiet for too long. Luna began to seek her out. Not obviously, but Natalie would turn from dusting a shelf to find the girl's small form seated just beyond the doorway, watching, sometimes with a toy in her lap, sometimes with nothing at all. Natalie never called attention to it. She simply continued, letting Luna come and go like moonlight, Ursula only when the darkness allowed. Days passed. Then, a week later, Luna smiled. It happened once, fleetingly, when Natalie spilled a basket of folded towels and muttered a clumsy, "Well, that's not how they go." The smile was brief, delicate, almost like it didn't want to be seen. But it was real, and Damien saw it. He was on the staircase and had stopped in place when he noticed Soaps, his daughter, smiling, and Natalie picking up the towels with a sheepish grin. He stood there a long time. The household had changed, not in loud ways, but in the ways that mattered. Luna's eyes held a flicker of trust. The rooms carried a gentler air, and Damien found himself lingering more often at doorways, near windows, watching the shift he never expected, never believed possible. But, still, fear lived in him. Hope was fragile, and what Natalie stirred in this house was dangerous. Because it made him feel, and feeling could destroy everything if it was taken away again. He watched her from afar, suspicion and awe battling in equal measure. Who was Natalie? And why did it feel like she was the first breath the mansion had taken in years? He didn't know. But he was beginning to understand. She was no ordinary maid. She was something else entirely. The sun was barely rising when Damien stood outside Luna's door, hesitant, holding a folded note in his hand. Inside, he heard the soft rhythm of Natalie humming while brushing Luna's hair. The sound had become oddly comforting, familiar, almost like morning birdsong. He didn't knock. Instead, he waited until Natalie stepped out, gently closing the door behind her. "Good morning, sir," she said, surprised to see him, whimpered on her way. "Luna's already dressed. She wanted to wear the purple dress today." "Bully, I noticed," he said, offering a small smile. Then he held out the note. "We're going somewhere today, both of you." Natalie hesitated before accepting it. She unfolded the thick stationery and read, "Whitmore Family Art Center, private entry, 10:00 a.m. An art center. Loves color," Damien said. "Used to paint with her mother all the time. I thought, maybe it was time." Natalie nodded slowly. "She'll love it." "Yes. I want you to come." She looked up, startled. "Me?" He met her gaze. "Yes, you seem to know how to reach her. I'd like to see that somewhere outside these walls." Natalie blinked, searching his face for anything other than sincerity. But all she found was quiet hope. "I'll get her ready." The ride to the center was quiet at first. Luna sat between them in the back seat of Damien's sleek black car, clutching a small, plush rabbit. Her fingers ran up and down its ears, a soothing motion. Natalie glanced at the girl, then out the window, watching the city blur by. Damien finally broke the silence. "He used to come here every Saturday," he said, almost to himself. "It was her mother's tradition. They'd paint side by side." Towards conflict when Marianne moved in with Natalie. Let alone barely had a library, let alone an art center. "You grew up outside the city?" She nodded. "Small place? Quiet? Nothing like this." He turned slightly toward her. "Big family?" Natalie gave a soft smile. "2 brothers, one older, one younger. The youngest, Leo, he had autism. High support needs." Damien stilled. He didn't speak until he was 8, and even then, only in short words. He'd rock when it was loud, cover his ears when people laughed. Strangers thought he was being rude, or worse. "Your parents?" Her jaw tightened. "My dad left when Leo was 4, said he couldn't handle the burden. My mom worked doubles. That left me." "You took care of him." She nodded. "Fed him, bathed him, helped him get dressed. I taught him how to communicate with pictures, taught him how to count blocks, how to cry when he needed to, not to scream. Damien was silent. I learned how to listen without words, she added quietly. His gaze dropped to Luna, who was now watching the buildings pass outside. Is that why you understand her? He asked. Natalie shrugged. Maybe, or maybe she just needed someone to see her. The car slowed as they reached the center. A valet opened the door, and Damien stepped out first, then helped Luna down gently. Natalie followed, eyes wide at the building's elegant design. The entrance was framed by stained glass windows and tall arched doors. It felt more like a cathedral than an art center. Inside, the gallery was empty, closed to the public for the morning. Soft classical music played from overhead speakers. Warm lighting bathed the space in gold. Canvases lined the walls of color, abstract expressions, and tender portrait. Luna walked slowly, her hand still wrapped around Natalie's fingers. Damien followed a few steps behind, watching them both. They entered a side studio where blank canvases and easels awaited. Fresh paint pots had been arranged neatly, brushes fanned out like sun rays. She can paint whatever she wants, Damien said. No rules. Natalie knelt beside Luna. Want to try something? Luna didn't respond, but her gaze flicked toward the colors. Natalie dipped a brush in soft blue and gently painted a line across the canvas. Then she handed the brush to Luna. The little girl stared at it, then reached for green. She dabbed a spot in the center. Then another. Natalie smiled, brushing her own line across the top, purple this time. Within minutes, they were painting side by side, colors blending, strokes overlapping. Luna didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Damien stood in the doorway, frozen. It was the first time he had seen Luna create since Elise's death. His daughter, once unreachable, now leaned into the canvas with concentration, lips parted just slightly, completely absorbed. Natalie glanced up, catching him watching. She smiled. He didn't smile back, but he didn't look away either. An hour passed. Then another. And for the first time in a long time, time itself didn't feel like something Damien needed to manage. On the drive home, rain began to fall lightly. Just a mist at first, then steady drops against the windshield. Luna dozed in her car seat, head tilted to the side, cheeks flushed from exertion. Natalie watched her a moment, then looked out the window again. I'm happy, Damien said softly. Natalie nodded. She's safe. He glanced at her. You know, I thought I was doing enough, paying for experts, buying the best equipment, giving her security. She didn't need things, Natalie whispered. She needed presence. The rain fell harder now, streaking the windows. Her mother, he said. He stiffened. Natalie didn't press. She just let the silence rest between them like a shared grief. More Mondays last year, she finally said. Lung cancer, fast, ugly. To place Leo in a home after that. He's safe there, well cared for, but I still feel like I failed him. She turned to him. And you didn't fail Luna. The words hit him harder than he expected. The car pulled up to the mansion. But as they stepped out, Damien's phone buzzed. His assistant. He picked it up, brows furrowing. Then his expression changed, darkened. What is it? Natalie asked, noticing the shift. He didn't answer, just turned the screen to show her. A tabloid site. Billionaire's secret romance. Whitmore's maid seen coddling his daughter. Sources say, more than a job. Below, it was a photo, clearly taken from afar, of Natalie holding Luna's hand as they entered the art center. Natalie's face went pale. Natalie stared at the screen, her breath caught in her throat. The headline screamed scandal, twisting her care into something sordid. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled further. There were more photos, one of her brushing Luna's hair by the garden window, another of them painting side by side, their hands covered in streaks of color. I didn't know, she began, but Damien had already turned away. He was silent as they stepped inside the mansion. Luna, now cradled in his arms, drowsy and unaware of the storm outside or the one rising inside. Natalie followed behind, heart pounding. Once Luna was tucked into her room, Damien closed the door softly and turned to Natalie. His voice was low. "We'll handle this." Natalie shook her head. "I can't let this hurt you. You didn't do anything wrong." "You're Maid, Mr. Whitmore," she said, voice cracking. "You're the billionaire widower. I'm just the help. This will explode, and people will twist it. Say I was after your money, or worse." He looked at her for a long moment. "Do you care what people say?" "What it does to her," she whispered. "To Luna. She'll feel it. She may not say it, but she always feels it." He exhaled sharply, pushing a hand through his hair. "I'll make calls. Shut it down." But Natalie was already shaking her head. "I should go." The words hit like a punch. Damien straightened. "What?" "I'll pack my things tonight. You'll find someone new. Someone qualified, quiet, professional. Someone who won't be in the tabloids." His jaw tensed. "You think anyone else could do what you've done?" "It doesn't matter," she said. "This world, your world, it wasn't made for people like me. It'll chew me up and spit me out, and I won't let it take her with me." He stepped closer. "Don't you dare make this about your place. This is about fear." "No, Mr. Whitmore, this is about love." Her voice trembled. "I like that little girl," she said, tears in her eyes. "I love her like she was my own. That's why I have to leave, because if I stay, I'll ruin the fragile piece she's just begun to find." Damien opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he looked powerless. Natalie turned away before he could see her fall apart. Hours passed. She packed quietly, methodically. The rain hadn't stopped. Thunder cracked in the distance, and every boom reminded her of how fast things could fall apart. She had just zipped her last bag when she heard soft footsteps in the hallway. It was Luna. The girl stood there barefoot, clutching her plush rabbit, eyes glassy and red. Natalie dropped to her knees. "Sweetheart?" Luna walked over slowly, then placed her hand on Natalie's cheek. Natalie broke. She pulled the child into her arms and rocked her gently, just as she had during that terrible storm. No words, just a lullaby whispered through tears, and then Luna whispered back. "Stay," Natalie gasped. Luna's tiny fingers clutched her shirt tightly. "Stay, please." Completely looked up and found Damien standing at the end of the hall, soaked from the rain, having clearly just returned. He had heard it too. Their eyes met, and something inside him broke. Later that night, they sat in the dimly lit sunroom. Rain tapped against the glass. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner. Natalie sat curled on the couch, still unsure what would happen next. Damien stood at the window for a long time before finally speaking. For protection, for control. I thought if I kept everything in order, if I didn't let anyone in, nothing could break me again." Natalie said nothing. He turned slowly. "And then you arrived, and somehow, without even trying, you reached the one person I couldn't." He walked over and sat across from her. "Daughter," said her first word in years, "and she said it to you." Natalie blinked back tears. "I don't care what the tabloids say," he added. "Let them write their lives. I'll silence the noise. I've done it before." She stared at him. "You're asking me to stay?" "Now," he said softly. "I'm asking you to choose to stay." Natalie hesitated. "What about the world?" she asked. "What about your reputation?" "I've built a life where everything looks perfect from the outside," he said. "But inside, it's been hollow. Until now." He leaned forward. "Stay. Not because I need a maid, but because Luna needs you, and maybe... So? Do I. Giovanni, so do I. You've been the strongest person in this house since the day you arrived." Silence settled between them like a thread pulling tight. Finally, Natalie nodded. "I'll stay," she whispered. Damien nodded, relief flashing briefly in his eyes. "Thank you." But just as peace began to return, a phone buzzed again. Damien checked the screen and frowned. "What is it?" Natalie asked. He hesitated. "That article? It wasn't just a tabloid hit." He passed her the phone. An anonymous source had leaked confidential information about Luna's diagnosis, private video footage from the mansion's cameras, and photos taken from inside the estate. Natalie stared in horror. "There's someone inside this house," she breathed. "Someone who wants to destroy you." "No worries," Damien said, his voice grim. "Not me." He looked up, his eyes darkening. "We're after you." The rain outside turned to a storm again. But inside the mansion, the real threat had just begun to surface. And Natalie realized, for the first time since arriving, that her presence in Luna's life might not just be a blessing, might be the very thing putting them all in danger. The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the tall windows of Whitmore Manor, casting long shadows across the silent hallways. The scent of chamomile lingered faintly in the air from Luna's bedtime tea the night before. Natalie was in the study, carefully sorting the books Luna had been thumbing through earlier. Children's stories with colorful covers and worn edges. The quiet should have brought peace, but unease clung to the walls like fog. Damien stood in his private office upstairs, shoulders tense, brow furrowed as he read the articles splayed across his monitor. The headline, in bold, mocking letters, pierced him like a blade. "Whitmore's widow, more than just hired help." The subtext was worse. Suggestions that Natalie Cruz had embedded herself in the household to manipulate a vulnerable billionaire and gain access to his. The article named no source, but quoted an anonymous industry insider who claimed Damien had been emotionally compromised and that the maid's suspicious influence on both father and daughter was deeply concerning. Damien scrolled down, each word punching a deeper hole into his gut. There were even paparazzi photos from the art center trip, Damien smiling faintly in the background. He didn't need to guess who was behind this. Olivia Langford. She had been circling him like a vulture for months, offering investment deals, trying to link their firms. When he refused her recent proposal and pulled out of a shared project, she didn't even pretend to be subtle in her fury. This was her retaliation, and she knew exactly where to hit him. Reputation and heart. The intercom buzzed. Margaret's voice came through, brittle. "Sir, the board has requested an urgent meeting. They want answers." Damien pressed his fingers to his temples. "Tell them I'll call in." He closed the article with a violent jab of the mouse and leaned back. The moment he allowed someone to care for Luna, to care for him, this happened. Maybe they were right. Maybe he had let his guard down too far. He had invited trouble, even if it had come with kind eyes and gentle hands. Upstairs, Natalie sensed something had shifted. The staff were quiet, too quiet. Whispers stopped when she walked into rooms. Glances turned sharp. Even Mrs. Gill, the head housekeeper, avoided her gaze. As she folded Luna's laundry, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an old friend who still followed gossip pages. "Nat, you're trending. Are you okay?" With trembling fingers, she clicked the link. Her heart plummeted. There she was, plastered across headlines, painted as a gold digger, a manipulator, a threat to one of the most powerful families in the state. She sat on the edge of Luna's bed, pulse racing, eyes stinging. All the progress she'd made, all the moments with Luna, the night the child had whispered "Mama." Were they going to be erased by lies? She heard footsteps in the hallway, measured, hesitant. Damien appeared in the doorway. His expression was unreadable. She stood immediately. "Mr. Whitmore, He raised a hand. "I've seen the article." Her voice cracked. "It's not true, I know it's not," he said too quickly, too quietly. "But that doesn't mean it doesn't matter." Natalie's breath caught. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying the investors are calling. The board is furious. They want damage control." Natalie flinched. "And I'm the damage?" He hesitated. "They want me to make a statement, publicly. That I've dismissed you?" The words struck like ice to the chest. Nadine's lips trembled. "And will you?" He didn't answer. Her hands folded in front of her, tightly. "Then I'll save you the trouble." Damien's eyes flickered, but he didn't stop her as she turned and walked past him, her shoulders rigid, her steps silent. Upstairs, in her small room, Natalie packed her few belongings in a plain duffel bag. She moved slowly, robotically, stopping only when she found Luna's drawing tucked into the edge of the dresser mirror. A crayon sketch of 3 stick figures, one tall with brown hair, one smaller with black curls, and a third over Wem. Above them, the child had scrawled the word, home. Natalie's tears blurred the drawing as she folded it and placed it gently into her bag. She sat at the small desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. Her hand shook as she wrote. Luna, I'm so sorry. I never meant to leave you. I will always care for you, even if I can't be near you. Remember the stars, little one. Look for Orion's belt when you're scared, and Humar song when you miss me. You are brave, you are loved. Love always. Natalie? She folded the letter and left it on the nightstand near Luna's favorite stuffed rabbit. Her eyes lingered on the room one last time before she stepped out, heart splintering with each footfall. But Luna had already noticed something was wrong. The house had a different rhythm when Natalie wasn't humming. Her room was too quiet. The morning banana slices weren't cut the way she liked them, and the scent of her jasmine soap was fading. When Luna wandered down the hallway and peeked into Natalie's room, she saw the half-empty drawers and the bag by the door. She moved toward the nightstand. Rabbit was there, but Natalie wasn't. She saw the letter. She couldn't read it, but her fingers touched the folded paper. Her breath shortened. She let out a small whimper, then a keening sound, the pressure in her chest unbearable. And then she ran. Damien was in the study, arguing on a conference call when Margaret burst in. Sir, Luna, she's gone. Natalie's room is packed, the back gate's ajar. Luna's missing. Damien dropped everything. Bina yelled as she flew toward the garage. Hopsy barked out toward the garage. Luna didn't know where she was going. Only that her feet moved faster than her thoughts, that her chest hurt in a way she didn't have words for. She ran through the field behind the estate, the wind slicing at her cheeks, her hair wild. Her sneakers thudded over damp earth until she reached the garden at the far end of the property. The one with the stone bench and the roses. The one where her mother had been buried. She collapsed at the foot of the grave, her small hands curling into the dirt. Damien arrived minutes later, breathless, panic ripping through him. Luna, he called out, Luna. Then he saw her, kneeling at the grave, rocking back and forth. Natalie was already there. She had circled back, after realizing she couldn't leave without saying goodbye. She'd seen the back gate open, her instincts firing. She had followed the path and found Luna huddled by the stone. She was holding the goodbye letter against her chest. Natalie sat beside her, pulling the child into her arms without a word. Luna didn't resist. She just pressed her forehead against Natalie's chest and let out a silent sob. Damien stood frozen, witnessing it all. His daughter didn't cry for him, he cried for her. And in that moment, the weight of every guarded decision, every emotion he had locked away since his wife's death, came crashing down. He moved forward slowly, falling to his knees beside them. I'm sorry, he whispered. Natalie didn't look at him, she just rocked Luna gently, shielding her from the world with the same hands that had once scrubbed marble floors. Her voice cracked. I was wrong, she said nothing, but the look in her eyes was enough. Luna's breathing finally began to slow as Natalie continued to hold her, the rocking motion instinctual, the hush of her humming barely audible. They were a fragile sculpture carved out of pain and comfort, two souls abandoned too many times and yet still choosing to hold on. Damien sat beside them, watching the pair as rain clouds gathered above, a soft drizzle beginning to fall like forgiveness from the sky. I never wanted this to happen, Damien said quietly, his voice raw, like someone discovering his own humanity again. I should have protected you both. Natalie glanced up for the first time, her dark hair clinging to her damp cheeks. You were scared. He nodded, swallowing hard. Terrified. I was so afraid of losing what little I had left. I didn't realize I was pushing away what I needed most. Luna lifted her head from Natalie's chest, her eyes glassy but calm now, and reached one small hand to Damien's arm. Her fingers barely touched his sleeve, but the gesture was enough to unravel him completely. He looked between them and whispered, "Come home." Natalie hesitated. "I don't mean back to work," he clarified. "I mean, come back as the person who Luna trusts, as the person I trust." Her eyes widened slightly, vulnerable, unsure. "They won't stop, Damien. People like Genevieve, the press, the board, they'll always find something to say." "Then let them," he replied without hesitation. "Let them talk, let them speculate. I'm not choosing investors over my daughter's smile. Or your heart." The rain fell harder now, but none of them moved. Luna simply leaned into both of them, her small body nestled between the only two people who had never asked her to be anything but herself. Eventually, they made their way back to the house, soaked and shivering, but changed. Not in the grand, sweeping way that stories often promise, but in a quiet, tectonic shift, the kind that settles deeper than bone. Evening, the manor felt different. Warmer. Alive. Natalie helped dry Luna's hair by the fireplace, while Damien brewed hot cocoa in the kitchen, himself, earning playful stares from Margaret and the other staff. He didn't care. Let them whisper, let them adjust. Later that night, Damien sat at his desk and pulled out his personal stationery. He penned a letter, this time not a resignation or a denial, but an open letter addressed to the board, the investors, and the public. In it, he told the truth. About how Natalie had saved his daughter, not with medicine or money, but with patience and love. How no one else had reached Luna in all these years, and how no one else ever would. He acknowledged the cruel rumors and denounced them with quiet but powerful resolve. And he ended with a line that made Margaret wipe her eyes when she read it the next morning. "She is not the maid. She is the reason my daughter laughed again." The press release went viral within hours. The backlash against the tabloids was swift. Mental health advocates, special needs forums, and thousands of readers rallied behind Natalie. Hashtags trended. Let Luna Smile became a movement overnight. Came lately. Genevieve Langford, cornered and publicly shamed, was forced to make a statement denying involvement in the rumor's origin. But her silence about the evidence spoke volumes. And investors who once questioned Damien's choices now praised his integrity. Still, none of it mattered to Natalie as much as the next morning's moment. She stood by the breakfast table, watching Luna run in from the garden, mud on her shoes, leaves tangled in her hair, a bright flower clutched in one hand. "You," Luna said in a soft voice, holding the daisy toward Natalie. Natalie's breath caught. She took the flower with trembling fingers, kneeling down. "Did you pick this for me?" Luna nodded. Then, shyly but with certainty, she added, "Mama." The word no longer accidental, no longer a slip, but a choice. Tears filled Natalie's eyes as she pulled Luna close. She didn't glance toward Damien. She didn't have to. She knew he was standing behind her, witnessing it all, just as he had that night in the rain. Later that afternoon, Natalie found a small box outside her bedroom door. Inside was a single silver key and a note in Damien's careful handwriting. "This door is always open, for however long you choose to stay." Days passed, and though the mansion returned to its quiet routines, the air remained forever changed. The hush of shame had been replaced by the hum of trust, the silence of grief now softened by laughter. One evening, while Luna painted on the patio, Damien joined Natalie by the stone bench near the grave. They stood in silence for a moment before he spoke. "She'd be happy," he said. Natalie looked up. "Your wife?" He nodded. To see Luna smile. To know someone was brave enough to love her without fear. Natalie glanced toward the little girl playing in the sunlight. "She's the brave one." Damien turned toward her. "So are you." There was something in his eyes then, vulnerable, open, but not urgent. He wasn't asking anything of her. Not her loyalty, not her forgiveness, not even her love. Just presence was what made it real. Natalie reached for his hand, not tightly, just enough for him to feel it was there. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Good." As they stood beneath the growing stars, Luna ran up and grabbed both their hands in hers. They all laughed as she pulled them toward the garden path, demanding a silly dance under the twilight sky. They danced. Badly. They danced freely, and no headline could ever capture that. No accusation could ever touch the truth now stitched between them. They were more than survivor and savior. They were family. Damien's hands were trembling as he unlocked the front door of the Whitmore estate. Rain clung to his suit, but he barely noticed. Natalie walked beside him, her clothes soaked, arms wrapped around Luna, who still clung to her like a fragile porcelain doll. The storm outside had finally begun to ease, but the one that had torn through their lives had left behind something neither of them could ignore. The moment they stepped inside, the warmth of the house contrasted the chill that still hung in the air around them. Damien turned to Natalie, his voice tight, almost hoarse. "Take her to the sunroom. I'll have hot cocoa brought in. She likes it warm, not hot." Natalie nodded silently and guided Luna down the hallway. For a moment, Damien stood alone in the foyer, staring at the grand staircase, then up at the portrait that hung above the marble landing, a painting of his late wife. He exhaled and pulled out his phone. 10 minutes later, Natalie re-entered the room. Luna was resting on a cushioned bench by the window, a soft blanket wrapped around her, gazing at the rain that still fell in gentle threads against the glass. Natalie's eyes moved to Damien, who was now pacing, still in hand. "Called someone?" she asked softly. Damien looked up. "Everyone." A flicker of confusion passed over her face. "Everyone?" "Media, my PR team." "A few board members." His eyes settled on hers, unwavering. "This ends today. The lies, the shame, the whispers. You've endured enough." Natalie's mouth opened, then closed again. She hadn't expected this. Not after everything. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "You don't have to do this for me." "I'm not," Damien said. "I'm doing it for Luna, for this family, for the truth." Less than 2 hours later, the grand hall was lit brighter than it had been in years. Journalists filed in with cameras, microphones, and murmurs of curiosity, unsure why they had been summoned so suddenly by the famously private Damien Whitmore. The staff watched from the upper balcony. Natalie stood beside a pillar, hidden partially behind a velvet curtain, her hands twisting nervously. Luna remained upstairs with her nanny, but her presence seemed to linger in every corner of the mansion, as if the house itself knew it was about her too. Damien stood beneath the chandelier, alone, in front of a long, wooden lectern. When the cameras turned on and the room silenced, he began. "I don't make public statements," he said, voice firm but calm. "And I've never responded to rumors, but this time, I must." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "A woman came into my home several months ago. Not with wealth, not with influence, but with something more powerful. Kindness. She didn't ask for praise or position. She gave my daughter what no doctor, no therapist, no relative could do. Connection. Peace. Safety." Damien looked toward the curtain where he knew Natalie stood, frozen in disbelief. She was accused of manipulation, of being a distraction, of being a risk. But here's the truth. She's the reason my daughter laughed last week. She's the reason my daughter spoke after years of silence. She is, in every way that matters, the heart that brought light back into this home. Murmurs swept across the press gallery. Damien leaned forward slightly, finishing softly. "Her name is Natalie Cruz, and if anyone has questions about her integrity, I'll answer them, because I stand with her." He stepped back. Cameras flashed, reporters began to shout questions, but Damien had already turned away. He didn't need to hear them. He had said everything that mattered. Natalie's breath caught. Her eyes burned. She backed away from the curtain and turned, needing air, needing space, needing... She didn't make it far before Damien found her. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Hey," he replied. "You were ready to leave everything behind for Luna's sake. I couldn't let that go unspoken." Natalie looked up at him, her dark eyes wide and shining. "But now the whole world thinks I'm..." "I don't care what they think," his voice lowered. "I care what you think. About me. About us." The words froze her. "Spent years behind walls, Natalie," he continued. "Walls I built myself. Grief did that to me. But you opened a door I thought was sealed forever." Natalie shook her head slowly. "Damien, You're grieving. This could be confusion. I'm not confused, he said. You're my employer, she said carefully. You're Luna's father. There's a line, and I think... Do you love her? He asked suddenly. Natalie blinked. What? Do you love Luna? She didn't hesitate. With all my heart. Then don't pretend there's a line between us anymore, he said, because she's already drawn the picture for us. At that moment, soft footsteps echoed behind them. They turned. Luna stood there, barefoot in her nightgown, a crayon still in her hand and a piece of folded paper clutched in the other. She walked straight to Natalie and Damien, placed the drawing between them, and looked up. On the paper was a simple sketch. A house, 3 figures holding hands, and a heart drawn above their heads. Luna reached for both their hands, pressing them together. Stay, she whispered. It was only one word, but it shattered everything. Natalie gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. Damien choked back emotion, his other hand rising to cradle Luna's head as she leaned into him. He looked at Natalie. I don't want you to be my maid anymore, he said, voice trembling. She held her breath. I want you to be our family. Natalie's fingers trembled against Damien's as Luna's small hand rested on top of theirs, sealing a silent vow with the innocence only a child could offer. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, louder than any applause, louder than any doubt. The world had spun too fast for too long, but now, everything had stilled into this one, fragile, unbreakable moment. You don't mean that, she whispered, afraid her voice might break whatever spell had formed between them. To do, Damien said, not pulling away. More than anything. Natalie blinked hard, fighting the tears that blurred her vision. I was hired to clean your floors, not walk into your heart. Damien stepped closer. You did both, and far more. Vaguely she blinked. I didn't plan this, she murmured. No, he said gently. And that's what makes it real. Luna tugged on Natalie's shirt gently, then held the crayon up again, as if urging her to finish the picture. Natalie knelt, pulled Luna into her arms, and for a moment buried her face into the little girl's soft shoulder. I'm scared, she confessed, not to Luna, but to Damien. Damien admitted, but for the first time in years, I want to try. The next morning dawned differently. The mansion that once felt too cold, too cavernous, seemed to hum with a quiet sense of belonging. The staff moved more softly, their eyes carrying the flicker of something they hadn't seen in years: hope. Natalie walked down the staircase in a soft cream blouse and jeans. No uniform, no badge of service, just herself. She felt the weight of every stare, every breath, every whispered prayer she hadn't dared speak. Damien was already downstairs, sitting at the long dining table with Luna beside him, her legs swinging freely. As Natalie entered, Luna's face lit up. She clapped softly and without a word patted the seat beside her. Natalie sat. Hot cocoa? Damien asked, offering her the second mug. She smiled, fingers wrapping around the warmth. You remembered. I never forget what matters. Their eyes met, the silence thick with everything neither of them had words for yet. Contacted a speech therapist, Damien said suddenly. Not just for Luna, but someone who understands autism on a sensory level. Natalie blinked, impressed. That's a big step. You made me realize I've been trying to fix things that aren't broken, Damien admitted. Luna doesn't need fixing. She needs freedom. Natalie placed her hand over his on the table, squeezing gently. You're doing great, Damien. More than you think. Before she could say more, a knock came at the door. The butler appeared a moment later, looking slightly anxious. Sir, the media is still outside. Damien's jaw clenched, then relaxed. Let them wait. I've said what I needed to. But Natalie stood. Let me, she said. I need to face this. Damien rose too. You don't owe them anything. I owe Luna peace, and I won't have her grow up in whispers and half-truths. He hesitated, then nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. Outside, cameras snapped the moment Natalie stepped onto the grand porch. The morning sun danced on the wet pavement, and a breeze caught the hem of her blouse. For a moment, she stood silently, allowing the noise to quiet. "Not here to defend myself," she said simply. "I'm here to speak as a woman who loves a little girl who gave me a reason to believe again." The reporters froze. "I didn't come here to chase a story or a fortune or a title. I came here for work. I stayed because of love." A pause. Wildly for that. Inside, Damien watched her from the window, his heart pounding. She didn't need him to rescue her. She was already standing in her own power. When she finally stepped back into the house, he was waiting with a towel and a quiet smile. "I saw that," he murmured. "You're not the only Whitmore who can make a statement," she said playfully. He laughed, then reached into his pocket. Natalie blinked as he slowly pulled out a small, velvet box. Her breath caught. "Damien?" "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Not yet." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold locket. On one side was a tiny photo of Luna. On the other, a single word engraved, "Stay." "I had it made last night," he said. After she said it, Natalie's fingers trembled as she touched the locket. "Damien? I'm not asking for forever. Not yet," he whispered. "Just stay. Let's see where this takes us. For her, for us." She nodded slowly, tears glistening. "I can do that." As he clasped the chain around her neck, Luna came running into the room again, her favorite crayon clutched in her hand. She tugged on Natalie's blouse, then pointed to the fridge. Curious, Natalie followed her. There, taped beside the grocery list, was Luna's newest drawing. A wedding. Stick figures again. Damien in a tuxedo, Natalie in a gown, and Luna throwing flowers in the air. Natalie covered her mouth. "Too soon?" Damien asked behind her with a crooked smile. Natalie turned, half lost it, half crying. "Let's start with breakfast first." "Deal," he said, reaching for her hand. And as they walked back into the kitchen, hand in hand, Luna trailing behind them with crayons in both fists and the world beginning to spin again. This time, not out of control, but into something new. They finally allowed themselves to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, this was what healing looked like. A mansion once ruled by silence, now echoed with laughter. And the heart that had been closed for so long had finally opened wide, because of a child who spoke one word and the woman who dared to stay. The morning sun poured gently through the tall glass windows of the Whitmore estate, but it was no longer the cold, silent place it had once been. The halls echoed with quiet laughter and the soft patter of tiny footsteps. Where there had once been polished floors and silence, there were now rugs with cartoon suns and stars, scattered storybooks and crayon drawings stuck proudly to the walls with colorful tape. Natalie stood at the kitchen counter, barefoot and humming softly as she arranged slices of apple into the shape of a heart on a small plate. Behind her, the sound of soft feet approached. "Yes, Mimey," Luna's small voice called. Natalie turned, smiling. She never grew tired of hearing that word. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" Luna, now 8, nodded and wrapped her arms around Natalie's waist. She still didn't speak in long sentences, but her progress in the last year had been nothing short of miraculous. Where there had once been silence and fear, there was now a bright-eyed little girl who whispered bedtime stories, laughed at silly jokes, and said, "I love you," in her own tender way. "Already beat me to the hug?" Damien's voice teased from the hallway, entering in his robe with a coffee mug in hand. Natalie laughed as Luna darted to her father. Damien scooped her up, peppering her cheeks with kisses that made her giggle. "Traitor," he whispered playfully to Natalie. "I used to be her favorite." "You're still her favorite," Natalie said, reaching to brush a strand of hair behind his ear. "But she knows who controls the breakfast now." Luna's eyes lit up at the mention of food. She climbed onto her booster seat at the table as Natalie brought over the apple plate and some freshly scrambled eggs. There was something sacred about these mornings, so ordinary yet deeply extraordinary given where they had started. Damien's hand found Natalie's across the table. His fingers laced through hers, firm and warm. She squeezed his hand in return, still sometimes amazed this was real. A year had passed since the stormy night Luna had called Natalie Mama, and everything changed. Since then, Natalie had moved from being a maid to being the center of the Whitmore home. She and Damien had married under a willow tree in the estate gardens, surrounded by just a few close friends and family. Luna had worn a flower crown and clutched both their hands as they said their vows. It hadn't been flashy, but it had been perfect. Now, the estate wasn't just a house, it was a home, one filled with life and love and second chances. Natalie's mother, Rosa, came downstairs slowly, one hand on the rail, the other gripping her cane. She was doing better, so much better. The treatments had worked, her voice had returned, her energy slowly rebuilt. Now, she lived in the guest suite just across the hall, spending her mornings tending to the garden and her afternoons reading to Luna in Spanish, which the little girl was beginning to understand. El buenos días, mi amor, Rosa greeted as Luna ran to her with open arms. Dia, Luna whispered shyly. Rosa kissed her forehead, tearing up just a little as she always did when Luna spoke. She looked over at Natalie and whispered, "She grows stronger every day." "So do you," Natalie replied. Damien rose to help Rosa to her chair. Though their relationship had begun awkwardly, he now treated her with warmth and respect. Rosa often joked he was more obedient than her late husband had ever been. After breakfast, Luna rushed to her art corner, where dozens of her drawings now filled the room. She picked up a purple crayon and began sketching something on the corner of a large sheet of paper, already crowded with stick figures and sunflowers. Damien leaned over to glance at it. "Is that me?" he asked, pointing at a figure with a squiggly tie and very round head. Luna nodded, giggling. He asked, pointing to a figure beside it with long black hair and a heart drawn in red on her chest. "Mama?" Damien's eyes softened. "And the little one with wings?" Luna hesitated. "Baby," Natalie glanced over, surprised. "Baby?" Luna nodded again, holding up 2 fingers. "Two." It took a moment for the words to register. Natalie and Damien exchanged a look. "Luna," Damien said gently. Do you want a baby brother or sister?" The girl shrugged, but the smile on her face spoke volumes. Rosa chuckled from the table. "The child knows what she wants." Natalie blushed. She and Damien hadn't talked seriously about more children yet. The past year had been focused on healing, on helping Luna grow stronger, on building a life brick by brick. But as Damien took her hand once more, the conversation didn't feel so far off anymore. Later that afternoon, while Luna napped and Rosa listened to old Spanish radio songs from her suite, Damien and Natalie sat together in the garden. It had become Natalie's sanctuary, a space she'd slowly cultivated into rows of lavender, mint, roses, and lilies. Butterflies flitted between blossoms, and wind chimes played soft notes as the breeze passed. Damien watched her as she trimmed a hydrangea. "You're happy here," he said. "Eva," she answered without looking up. "This place feels like it has a soul now." He knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her cheek. "You gave it a soul." Natalie paused, heart tightening. "I used to think I didn't belong here, that I was just filling space in someone else's world." Damien took her hand, pressing it against his heart. "You are my world, Natalie, and Luna's." There was a long silence, the kind filled with truth too heavy for words. Then Damien whispered, "I've been thinking, maybe Luna's right." Natalie tilted her head. "Right about what?" "A baby," he said softly. Her eyes widened, caught between surprise and a flood of emotion. "With you? You really want that? With you?" "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Tears pooled at the corner of her eyes. I'd love that, too." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, the scent of lavender and soil mixing between them. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was real, grounded, rooted in everything they'd fought through to be here. In the weeks that followed, the idea blossomed quietly between them, like one of Natalie's garden buds. But even if it took time, even if nothing came quickly, they both knew it was no longer just a dream. We're a family, a real one, and families. That evening, the backyard of the Whitmore estate transformed into a quiet celebration. The long wooden table had been moved beneath the string lights Damien and Natalie had hung together weeks ago. Tiny bulbs twinkled like stars, casting a soft golden glow across the garden. Rosa sat at the head of the table, wearing her favorite knitted shawl, her cheeks warm from laughter. Luna sat beside her, giggling as she pointed to the night sky, whispering the names of constellations she had learned from a children's book Damien had bought her. Natalie emerged from the kitchen with a tray of roasted vegetables, placing it beside the steaming pasta and fresh bread Damien had insisted on making. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked around the table, at Rosa's warm smile, at Luna's sleepy joy, at Damien, who was already pouring sparkling cider into glasses. It was simple, nothing grand, no announcements or guests, but it was theirs. Damien raised his glass. To family, he said. Rosa lifted hers. To healing, Natalie met his gaze. To love. They clinked glasses and drank, the soft sound of crickets humming in the background. No one spoke for a while. There was no need. Everything that needed to be said was already wrapped in the silence between them. After dinner, Luna curled up beside Natalie on the cushioned bench swing, her head resting in her mother's lap as Natalie softly combed her fingers through her hair. The little girl hummed the tune of a lullaby, one Rosa had sung for her earlier that afternoon. Her eyes fluttered closed slowly, like petals folding in for the night. "How is she peaceful?" Damien whispered from the seat beside Natalie, watching Luna's tiny chest rise and fall. "She's safe," Natalie said, "and loved." Damien wrapped an arm around her shoulder, pulling her close. "That's because of you." Natalie shook her head gently. "It's because of us. All of us." Lucas swallowed. All of the reluctant attention had flown to her laddie. As Luna drifted off, Rosa hummed from across the garden, pruning a few herbs under the porch light. Natalie smiled. "You know," she said, "if someone had told me 2 years ago that this would be my life, I wouldn't have believed them." Damien leaned in, brushing his lips over her temple. "Neither would I. But here we are." Natalie laughed quietly. "You know what I used to dream about when I cleaned floors at night? Not riches or fame. I just wanted peace, somewhere quiet and kind, somewhere I wasn't afraid to hope." Damien kissed her again, this time slower. "You built that, and not just—" Luna stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep. Natalie pressed a kiss to her forehead. "She saved me," she said. "She saved both of us," Damien replied. The moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the yard. Rosa walked toward them, her cane tapping softly against the stone path. "She's out," she whispered, nodding toward Luna. "I'll take her inside." "I've got her," Damien offered gently, standing and lifting Luna into his arms with practiced ease. She curled into his chest, completely at home there. As he carried her inside, Natalie followed slowly, watching the man she once feared now hold their daughter like she was made of light. Inside, Damien laid Luna into her bed, tucking her in and kissing her cheek. Natalie adjusted the nightlight and placed her favorite stuffed fox beside her pillow. As they walked back downstairs, Natalie whispered, "She said something to me yesterday in therapy." Damien looked over. "What did she say?" "She said, 'I'm not scared when you're here, Mama.'" His breath caught. "I cried for an hour after that session," Natalie admitted, "because it means she feels safe enough now to be herself." Damien placed his hand on her back. "She's never been more herself than she is with you." They returned to the garden, the night cooler now. Natalie wrapped her shawl tighter as Damien lit the outdoor fire pit. They sat beside it, shoulder to shoulder, the flames flickering between them and the quiet dark beyond. After a long silence, Natalie turned to him. "Do you ever think about her?" Damien knew who she meant, his late wife. He nodded slowly. "I do. Not in the way I used to. It's different now." Natalie waited, not pressing. "I used to think I was betraying her just by breathing," he said softly. "And then you walked into our lives, and I realized something. Love doesn't die with the person, it just finds a new way to exist." Natalie's eyes welled with tears. "She would have loved you," he added, "because you saved her daughter, because you gave me back my soul." They sat there, the weight of truth heavy between them, but not painful anymore, just real. From the house came the faint sound of Rosa humming again, and upstairs, the soft shuffle of Luna rolling over in bed. Natalie looked up at the stars. "Thank you," she whispered. Damien frowned slightly. "For what?" "For letting me belong," she said. "For choosing me, not because you had to, but because you wanted to." He pulled her into his arms. "Native Cruz Whitmore, I didn't just choose you. I needed you. From the moment I saw you in that hallway with Luna, I knew." She smiled against his chest. "You were so cold at first." He chuckled. "I was terrified, of losing control, of feeling something again. And then you, this stubborn, gentle, beautiful woman, came into our lives and turned everything upside down." Natalie leaned back, cupping his face. "We're building something here, Damien, something real." He nodded, voice husky. "We already have." As the fire crackled, the two of them sat in each other's arms, the night wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Inside, on Luna's dresser, her latest drawing lay unfinished. A big house with flowers around it. A little girl, a mommy, a daddy, and an old lady with a cane. Above them floated the word, home. The mansion that once stood in silence now breathed with life, every wall echoing with laughter, every step layered in memories built together. And somewhere in the heart of it all, love, unshakable and chosen, held them together like mortar between stone. Not born of blood, but of choice. Not perfect, but enduring. A family made by love.